How to silence a monster. I'll just say it bluntly at the start here. My genetic father is a horrible human being. By this point, I have completely cut contact with him. However, this happened on the very last time I ever had to see him. My mother left him when I was about 13-ish. However, due to his lies and manipulation, the court system failed me and I was still forced to see him. So the abuse he inflicted continued until I was 18, and only got worse after the divorce because he knew that hurting me meant it would hurt my mother. He is the absolute definition of trash, and my rather unique situation was only fuel on this dumpster fire. I won't go into too great of detail about his depravity, but I will simplify it and say that if you weren't a straight, white man or a straight woman in a prairie dress, then you were going to hell in his eyes and didn't deserve the time of day. As for me, being born as both genders, it was a living hell. I am intersex, which basically means I have incomplete traits from both sides. I actually didn't even find this out until I was almost an adult. However, I had a lot of health problems because of it, and due to looking highly androgynous growing up, I was called a freak. At birth, I was signed off as a girl, and when I began having some unique changes with puberty, it was drilled into me that I was basically just an ugly woman who didn't deserve anything because I didn't meet my father's standards. The discussion about my gender and who I am is a very long story. However, as an adult, I made the choice for both my physical and mental health to become fully male. Due to my father, there were only two people in my entire family who knew about this: my mother and my grandmother on my father's side. My mother is an amazing person and was extremely happy for me, and my grandmother was the sweetest woman you'd ever meet. Picture the stereotypical grandma who bakes cookies in children's books, and that was her. The woman would give her last penny just to make sure you felt happy and safe. She was delighted to hear that I was starting to find who I was. My grandfather passed away shortly after I was born. However, my grandmother started dating again many years later, and when I was 18, I got an invitation to her wedding. She was in her 70s and acting like a teenager with her new fiancé, and it was amazing to see her so happy. Of course, I wanted to go. There was just one problem. My father would be there too. At this point, I was already on hormone therapy for my treatments, had facial hair, a flat chest, didn't even look like my old self anymore, and I didn't want to think of the hell that would rain down from my father seeing me like this. But then I stopped myself in that moment and thought about it a little more, and after a bit of contemplating, I figured this would be perfect. He'd always lied to family about what happened, painting himself as this loving father. So what kind of perfect dad wouldn't be happy for their son? Out of absolute spite, I went to a thrift store, got myself a classy black and purple gown, got some makeup, a pair of heels, and went to the wedding in full drag. My mother questioned as to why I was dressing up like a woman for this instead of just grabbing my suit, and when I told her what I was going to do, she broke out into full belly laughter and began insisting on helping me get ready to go. The wedding was lovely, everyone was smiling, my grandmother was glowing the entire time, and I actually didn't see my father for the bulk of the reception. We had a big family, so I wasn't really surprised. However, at the end, as everyone was talking and getting cake, that's when my father spotted me. By this point, most of the family didn't even recognize me. However, when I was standing next to my mother, my father must have put the pieces together and started walking over. I told my mother to go and be with my grandmother, and I was now left alone with my abuser in a crowd of people. He came right up to me, asked how I was doing, and I just shrugged and continued people watching. He leaned against the wall with me, and just as I expected, he began lecturing me. He pointed to my grandmother and now step-grandfather and said, "You see that? Make sure you get yourself a good man like that, someone who makes enough to support you so you can stay home." I looked over at him, and in my now deep voice, I said, very simply, "That would be great if I didn't have a girlfriend." I wish I had a camera right at that moment, just to capture the image of his eyes growing wide as he choked on his own words, and for the first time, he was left speechless. I could see him getting angry and trying hard to contain it, but I didn't care. I just casually waved over my grandmother. She came over smiling, and for the very first time, I spoke openly with her in front of my father, telling her about my girlfriend and my journey into becoming a man. She was thrilled for me having a girlfriend, giving me a huge hug, and telling me to invite her so that she could come celebrate with everyone. And so, that's exactly what I did. My father remained speechless, just staring at me as his face turned red. not daring to say a damn thing in front of his own mother and the entire family. This was the one time that he was forced to be a decent human being to his child because he was surrounded by everyone he had lied to, and he was stuck between that lie and the man he really was. After a while of him just stewing in his very clear anger, he turned around and left without a word, walking out on his own mother's wedding. My grandmother had me and my mother sit with her and her now husband at a table, and we all laughed and ate, enjoying our time together and making memories without him. My step-grandfather asked why my father left so suddenly and asked if everything was all right, and when I told him what happened, he looked at me with a sigh and said, "This is supposed to be a joining of families today. If he doesn't want to be a part of that family, then so be it.